Paul had previously announced that this would be his last year and he'd retire at the end of the season.
When you stink like the Clippers, are you going to blame it on Chris Paul?
It's time for him to go.
Christopher Emmanuel Paul Sr., born May 6, 1985. Now that it's clearly reached its end point, Chris Paul's career can almost be summed up in one word: unfair. Unfair because one of the greatest point guards of all time deserved to go out with at least one championship, or at least better than quietly fading out in Los Angeles. Between years on non-competitive teams, the David Stern vetoed Lakers trade, injuries at the worst moments, the Suns' collapse against Milwaukee, and now clashing with the Clippers' staff, his journey feels incomplete. Whatever the case, Chris Paul's career still leaves uncomfortable questions. Did he fall short when it mattered most? And what are the biggest reasons this happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Chris Paul is a 6-foot point guard from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, who entered the league with expectations of control, not flash. At Wake Forest, he quickly separated himself from other guards by mastering pace, decision-making, and defensive instincts. As a sophomore, Paul led the Demon Deacons to the top of the ACC and national relevance, highlighted by his iconic performance against North Carolina when he dismantled Raymond Felton and the eventual national champions. He wasn't just productive, he was surgical. Drafted 4th overall in 2005, Paul made an immediate impact in New Orleans, winning Rookie of the Year and transforming a struggling franchise overnight. By his 3rd season, he was an MVP candidate, averaging elite numbers while leading the league in assists and steals. What truly elevated his reputation was consistency. Year after year, Paul ran top-tier offenses, elevated teammates, and became one of the smartest defensive guards the league had ever seen. By the time he reached his prime, Chris Paul wasn't just considered elite, he was widely viewed as the standard for how the position should be played. So why didn't that reflect in a championship at some point? Stunt number 1, injuries always came at the worst possible time. From the very beginning, Chris Paul's career was defined by timing and not in his favor. When he entered the league with New Orleans, he didn't just look like a great young point guard, he looked like the next standard. Control, pace, defense, leadership, everything the position was supposed to represent. By 23, he was already an MVP-level player, dragging an under-talented Hornets roster into relevance and going toe-to-toe with Kobe's Lakers in the playoffs. And then the pattern started. Every time he'd reach a moment where the door cracked open, his body failed him. In 2009, just as New Orleans was building momentum, a knee injury robbed him of his explosiveness. He adjusted, became smarter, more surgical, but that adjustment came early, far earlier than it should have for someone that talented. Chris Paul didn't get to peak physically and competitively at the same time. The story would repeat itself again and again. In Los Angeles, the Clippers finally gave him a real co-star and real expectations. Yet, nearly every postseason run ended the same way. A pulled hamstring, a broken hand, a strained groin. Not season-ending injuries on bad teams, but devastating injuries in series-defining moments. The kind that don't erase your greatness, but quietly steal championships. What made it worse is that Paul's teams were often built on narrow margins. They needed him healthy, sharp, and commanding every possession. There was no safety net. When he went down even slightly, the entire structure collapsed. Other stars missed games and survived. Chris Paul missed moments and everything fell apart. By the time he reached Houston and later Phoenix, the script was already written. He could elevate teams, stabilize chaos, and raise ceilings, but when the pressure peaked, so did the physical toll. The infamous hamstring injury against Golden State didn't just cost him a finals appearance, it reinforced a cruel narrative that followed him everywhere. Chris Paul wasn't unlucky once, he was unlucky consistently, and always at the exact moments his career needed mercy. Stunt number 2, the moments that slipped away. If injuries planted the seed of doubt, the moments that followed are where Chris Paul's career truly began to feel unfair. Again and again, he put himself and his teams in position to change the narrative, only for the door to be slammed shut at the worst possible time. None loom larger than in 2021. After years of bad luck, roster instability, and short playoff runs, Paul finally reached the NBA Finals with Phoenix. Up 2-0 against Milwaukee, the Suns looked composed, experienced, and in control. For a brief stretch, it looked like the universe was finally correcting itself. Giannis elevated to another level, the Bucks adjusted, and Phoenix stalled. Paul wasn't terrible, but he wasn't dominant either. Turnovers crept in, control slipped, and the Suns lost 4 straight. Fair or not, that series cemented a perception that had been quietly forming for years, that when the stakes rose highest, Chris Paul didn't always rise with them. Context mattered, but narratives rarely wait for nuance. This wasn't an isolated incident. In 2015, Paul and Blake Griffin went down while holding another 3-1 advantage. In 2018, he finally looked like the missing piece next to James Harden, only to suffer another untimely injury with the Rockets up 3-1 Golden State. That hamstring didn't just end the series, it ended the closest thing Paul ever had to a championship caliber situation that fully made sense. What made these moments sting wasn't just the losses, but how close they came to rewriting his legacy. Each collapse or injury stacked onto the last, creating a resume filled with near misses rather than defining triumphs. Critics point to leadership, temperament, or control issues. Supporters point to circumstance, timing, and roster flaws. Both arguments carry weight, but the result stayed the same. Chris Paul kept knocking at the door, and with every missed opportunity, the margin for forgiveness and for history got smaller. Stunt number 3, the timing was always cruel. As Chris Paul's career reached its final stretch, the disconnect between his resume and his reality became impossible to ignore. By this point, the debate wasn't about his greatness, it was about why someone this accomplished was exiting the league without the ending his peers enjoyed. Instead of riding off as a champion or respected veteran contributor on a contender, Paul found himself bouncing between situations that felt more symbolic than competitive. His return to Los Angeles was supposed to offer closure, but it only magnified the frustration. The Clippers were no longer a real title threat, and Paul wasn't being brought back as a cornerstone, just another voice in a locker room that didn't fully align with him. Reports of tension with coaching staff and organizational direction reinforced an old narrative that Chris Paul's leadership style, while effective for winning games, wasn't always easy to live with long term. Age and injuries also stripped away the last advantages he once held. The burst was gone, the margin for error smaller, and the league had fully shifted toward younger, faster guards who could score at will. Paul could still control tempo and read defenses better than almost anyone, but those skills mattered less in a league obsessed with pace, spacing, and availability. When durability disappears, even brilliance becomes conditional. What made this phase sting wasn't that Paul suddenly became bad, it was that the league no longer had space for what he represented. He isn't washed, but he also wasn't central. For a player who spent nearly 2 decades bending games to his will, fading out quietly feels wrong. In the end, Chris Paul's final years didn't diminish his greatness, they highlighted the gap between how good he was and how little the league could offer him once time caught up. That gap is what made the ending feel unfair. All in all, Chris Paul's career will always feel complicated because greatness and disappointment ran side by side. On paper, he did almost everything right. He mastered his craft, elevated teammates, adapted his game as his body aged, and stayed productive far longer than most guards ever do. Yet, when the moments that define legacies arrived, timing, injuries, and circumstance consistently turned against him. It's fair to question parts of his leadership style or whether his intensity wore thin in certain locker rooms, but it's just as fair to acknowledge how often his best chances were disrupted by forces out of his control. Veto trades, key injuries, and teams that peaked at the wrong time. Chris Paul wasn't short on brilliance, he was short on margin for error. His story isn't about failure, it's about how thin the line is between being remembered as an all-time great and being crowned as a champion. Whatever the case, Chris Paul leaves the game as one of the smartest and most skilled point guards ever, and personally one of my favorite to ever play the game. Even if the ending never matched the career he deserved, salute, much respect, but sadly to say, for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.